James, incredible day here in Washington, D.C. yesterday. Bibi Netanyahu was staying at the Watergate on one part of town. Now, if you go down Pennsylvania Avenue to Capitol Hill, where he was speaking yesterday, the protests got intense. There was pepper spray, there was American flags being burned in the streets, Palestinian flags were lifted at Union Station, which is pretty remarkable. This is kind of your gateway to Washington, D.C., this beautiful old building on Capitol Hill. The Palestinian flags were replaced and the American flags were lowered. Tell us a little bit more about what we saw in D.C. yesterday.
Yes, well, this was Benjamin Netanyahu's first visit to D.C. in nearly 4 years. It was obviously the first since the October 7th attack, so it comes at a particularly fraught moment for Israel, his leadership, and D.C. as well. So he was greeted to a lot of fanfare, with the one exception being, as you actually just mentioned, at the Watergate Hotel, where there are reports, as yet unconfirmed, that the protesters had dropped a pile of maggots in the hotel. So quite the welcome to Benjamin Netanyahu, but it was a really striking contrast with that and what went on inside the Hill. Now, at times it felt a little bit more like Pyongyang than DC. Netanyahu, and here's a little fact for you, Netanyahu broke the record of standing ovations for a foreign leader in Congress. He got 58 standing ovations during that speech versus 28 in 2015. So it just gives you an idea of just how warmly welcomed he was by some sections of Congress. Now, there was a notable and exceptional minority that did not participate. In fact, 30 congressional Democrats refused to attend, and the few that did, the progressive group, people like Rashida Tlaib, they decided to demonstrate their protests in their own way by holding up a sign saying war criminal. But it was a very tricky one for Democrats to navigate, and as you mentioned, Kamala Harris, she was not in attendance, but Joe Biden received a lot of praise. He's still recovering from COVID. So within the Hill, there was a bit of a divided reaction from that section of the Democrat Party. But much more so was going on outside. And I just want to show you a clip here. A pretty concerning clip as to what was going on outside. And it did actually escalate in a lot of ways. So we had a desecrated Columbus fountain. They took down 3 American flags and replaced them with Palestinian flags. But as you can see from some of these scenes, it got pretty ugly. And police officers ended up getting dragged around. They were burning flags, saying burn them down. So all in all, a pretty toxic atmosphere on the Hill.
You know, I was watching CNN before Netanyahu spoke yesterday, and their sources were telling them and other outlets that Netanyahu's team was reassuring Democrats because he had been invited by Speaker Mike Johnson. Nancy Pelosi wasn't there. I mean, it wasn't just the sort of Justice Democrats, the far left contingent. It was Nancy Pelosi skipped the speech. Kamala Harris did a campaign event instead of presiding over it in her role as President pro tem of the Senate. It's actually a pretty remarkable situation. And so they were saying Netanyahu has reassured Democrats that it's not going to be fiery. Some Democrats were saying they didn't want a repeat of his 2015 speech on the Iran nuclear deal in the halls of Congress. They wanted to see something different, a little bit less directly targeting Democrats. That is not the speech that Netanyahu delivered. He was extremely fiery and went head on into, he even addressed the protesters outside. He went completely all in on attacking Democrats and anybody, basically. Even Thomas Massie, a Republican, skipped it because he said he didn't want to feel like a prop. Netanyahu gave a very different speech than I think a lot of Democrats wanted. In fact, Nancy Pelosi weighed in to say it was, basically she said it was one of the most disrespectful speeches, just to paraphrase the statement that she put out afterwards. He at one point got some applause and wanted to continue making his argument and said, "Don't clap, listen." Mike Johnson was looking on just with reverence. It was really quite a scene. Republicans then, I was walking around the Hill after the protests had sort of dissipated, and you saw the protesters with their signs sort of slouched over at coffee shops, tired after a long day. At that point, Republicans descended on Union Station to put their own flags back at the places where the flags had been taken down, to get their own photo ops. I mean, it was just a crazy state of affairs all over this speech.
No, and you're right to say that the hold that Netanyahu had over the Congress, those in attendance, was quite extraordinary. And the fact that he had the confidence to say, don't clap. I don't think I've ever heard a leader in the Hill say don't clap. I mean, that's usually what they live for. But you were right in mentioning Nancy Pelosi. She actually tweeted out that it was the worst presentation by any foreign dignitary. So it was quite a divisive reaction. And Netanyahu, he was even dropping a few gags in there. He said, those who support gays for Gaza are basically the same as chickens for KFC. So he's clearly feeling pretty confident out there.
It was a moment that was sort of like the J.D. Vance Diet Mountain Dew line that went viral like the day before, where it was a please clap Jeb Bush type interaction with the audience. Chickens for KFC, nobody really knew what to do with it, but he did also really make a concerted effort to drive a wedge between Democrats who support gay rights and oppose what Israel is doing. So just all very interesting, James. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to the Undercurrents channel, and I'll see you back here soon.